And good evening, and welcome to another interview session of the Murfreesboro City School Board. We're in the process of trying to find a new director for our system. And tonight we welcome Dr. Chris Treadway as our applicant that we'll be talking to tonight. Chris, we're very glad to have you with us. I think you know all the board members and you have met them. We have 10 different criterions, and each board member will be asking you a question from a particular criterion, and we'll go through those questions and then we'll wrap up. I guess at this point I will ask you, we have all read your resume, the board has, and I know you participated in the Zoom meeting this afternoon. Is there anything that you'd like to tell us that is not on your resume?
Certainly.
Okay.
First thing I'd do is I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's truly an honor to sit before you tonight, and it's with the chance to be a part of Murfreesboro City Schools is quite the honor. So first off, thank you. The second thing I would like to say is you do have my resume before you, but I would say my resume is a lot like a student's test scores. And what I mean by that, it doesn't tell the whole story. There's a lot more to me than what's written on a piece of paper. It doesn't tell you that I grew up in poverty. It doesn't tell you that I felt the significant effects of adverse childhood situations. It also doesn't list the people who were there to help me during those times. It doesn't list the teachers that helped me along, pointed me back in the right direction. It doesn't list the coaches who gave me a ride home when I didn't have a ride home. It doesn't list the guidance counselors who helped me fill out financial aid paperwork and who helped me register or apply for colleges. It doesn't list any of those people, but I know that they were there. I had an opportunity to go back several years ago and speak at the high school graduation where I attended. Many of those teachers are graduated now, but just to have the opportunity to give them a hug and thank them meant the world to me, and it meant the world to them. So as we go forward tonight with tonight's dialogue, hopefully you'll get to know me a little bit better, but that's part of my why, and so I did want to share that with you.
Thank you very much. What will you do to help to create an atmosphere in the schools that will lead to educational excellence for all students?
Yeah, so all's important there. Most of the time when we think all, when that word is thrown out, we think of students at risk or students in high need. But we forget about the other side of the bell-shaped curve. We've also got to remember that there are some really high-achieving students out there that need just as much rigor, just as much challenge as the other kids need help. So when we're talking about academic excellence, we got to talk about both sides of the bell-shaped curve. You can't just talk about one side. So what would we do? So one of the first things I would do is I'd be sure that teachers had access to high-quality curricular resources, and they were vetted. And for also hopefully that they are not just vetted, but they're scientifically research-based. We know that they work. If you use them as intended, we know they're going to work. The difficult thing in education is almost everything works. And so a teacher can do something and they say, see, it worked. That kid's test score went up. But it's not about that because we know everything works. Some things work a lot better than other things. So it's our job to make sure that we're using vetted curricular materials that are adopted by us that we know work. Now, second thing I would do, you have to ensure high expectations for everybody in the district. High expectations for me, high expectations for you, for our teachers, for our administrators. We've got to raise the bar. We have to expect a lot from our kids. We have to expect a lot from ourselves as well. The third thing I would do is I'd make sure our teachers are trained. So many times I've seen teachers get a new textbook or get a new computer, they have no idea how to use it. That's not benefiting anybody. All that does is create frustration. So along with the high quality curricular resources, along with having high expectations, you also have to make sure that you hire really good people and then give them not just initial, one and done trainings are no good. You've got to have initial and ongoing professional development. And in that manner, you're going to see academic excellence. And I will add one thing. Academic excellence can't happen if a kid's in crisis. So we also need to be addressing their social and emotional needs.
Okay. What do you consider to be your major strengths that you would bring to this position? Let's say your top three.
Top three. All right. First off, I'm loyal to a fault. I'm loyal to those that I work with. I'm loyal to my family. The people that I work with become like family to me, and I become extremely loyal to them. That doesn't mean I don't hold them accountable. I'm loyal to my kids, but I still have to hold my kids accountable. The second thing I would say is I'm very determined, a very determined individual. Where others might see a roadblock and think, Lord, I can never get over that. There's no way that this is insurmountable. I immediately start problem solving, figuring out, okay, can we go over it, around it, under it? How are we going to take care of this? So I'm a very determined individual. Lastly, I would say that I have exceptional leadership skills. Those have been honed from a young age through sports and just having to be the man of my house at a very young age. You develop strong leadership skills, specifically leadership skills in the area of building capacity in others, as well as recognizing strengths in others and being able to get them in the right position so that they can maximize their talents.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barton?
Okay. Criterion 1 is all about change, okay? So the first thing I'm going to ask you, describe a significant change that you initiated in your current role, and tell us what evidence you have to show that it was positive, and how did you build support for that change?
And so I'll address the change itself first. In the district that I work, it is very diverse, much like Murfreesboro City Schools, and I would like to say I see diversity as a strength, an absolute strength. It is a strength of this community. It is a strength of the community where I'm currently employed. So we have a talent development program in our school for high achievers. But what we noticed as we looked at those classroom makeups, they didn't look like our school. The diversity within our school wasn't mimicked in that classroom. So then we started figuring out, why does it look like that? Why do we not have kids of color in that class? That's a real issue. And so we began to problem solve, and the associate director of schools at that time formed a committee which she invited me to be a part of. And we started analyzing, why is this happening? And so what we did, through surveys with parents, through surveys with teachers, gathering all kinds of feedback. We have talent development in grades 3 and 4, and talent development in grades 5 through 8. We did not have talent development in K2. So we hypothesized that it is possible the gap is getting so large in K2 and those kids' talents aren't being identified, maybe we're losing them. And so me being one of the middle school principals agreed to take my talent development teacher, move to K2 2 days a week, and see if our numbers look different. Now, we're in the third year of that. Last year, obviously, school was canceled, so we don't have a lot of statistical information, but I'm hoping in years 4 and 5 that we're going to see that start balancing out. We're going to see those classes start looking diverse like our community and our school. Now, what evidence? We don't have the evidence yet. We're in year 3. It's my belief that in education we're looking at 3 to 5 years of longitudinal data before you can make a true decision. Many times people jump from this shiny thing to this shiny thing. I think you got to stay the course. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll change. But let's just not keep jumping on the next sales pitch. So I'm not in support of that. So now we had to let the teachers know, let the staff know what we're doing, communicate it with the parents. This is why. Remember when we sent you that survey? Yes, I remember. Well, here were the results of that survey. Here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Here are the action steps we're going to take to reach this goal. Our goal is diversity in talent development classrooms. Here's our action, here's our goal, here are our action steps. So I'm optimistic that we'll see a positive trend.
How do you keep up with educational research and initiatives that may drive change? And sorry, that's okay. Hand in hand with that, because you could probably answer them both at the same time. How do you maintain a balance between the things that you already do that work and bringing in new initiatives?
Yeah. So here's what I'll say about educational research. Should you use it? Absolutely, you should use it. Should you monitor the way in which you use it? Yes. Here's what I know about research. It's not all transferable. You say, well, what do you mean by that? Okay, school A, you have to pay attention to the participants. What do the participants in that study look like? Do they look like the students in my school? Do they look like the students in my community? If they do, and it's a similar demographic, maybe it's transferable. You got to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. Otherwise, you're comparing apples to oranges. I'll never forget a quick story. I'm extremely competitive. There was a school knocking it out of the park, and I thought on their test scores, and I thought, I'm going to that school to figure out what they're doing. It was a magnet school when I got there. I'm not a magnet school. I wasn't the principal of a magnet school. So I did stay. I was disappointed, but I tell you that, but to use the analogy, you have to compare apples to apples. Now, as I previously noted, I'm not someone who likes to jump from one shiny thing to another. That doesn't do anything but confuse teachers. When I stand as the building principal or as a hopeful superintendent, if I stand before a body and I say, this is awesome, this is going to work, they might believe me the first time. But the next year when I say, I was wrong, that's not going to work, but this will work, that's not going to fly. So when you ping pong back and forth between different programs or different major goals, you lose faith in people. Your teachers start to doubt. So you got to stay the course. Now, absolutely, if we stay the course and in year 4 and 5 it doesn't work, we have definitive evidence that it didn't work. Many times people start changing things and they end up changing what was actually effective, but they had such little longitudinal data, they didn't realize that they changed the one thing, they left the bad things and changed the good things, so now it got worse. So anytime you're dealing with change in educational research, you need to be extremely careful, and you need to really pay attention to what you're doing.
Okay. Criterion 2 is about listening skills, listening abilities. The first one is, give us an example of a time you've changed your mind and taken a different course of action as a result of listening to others.
Yeah. So here's what I believe about changing one's mind and making decisions. We make decisions with the best information that we have at the time. So the decision that I've made, I was very confident in that decision because I made it with feedback from my stakeholders, with feedback from my teachers, feedback from all appropriate parties. But when you get new information that wasn't available earlier, it's kind of like planning for COVID, right? It's kind of like trying to hit a moving target. I changed my mind. So several years ago, we're at a principals meeting. The director calls us in and he says, state's given us a choice. What do you want to do, online testing or paper pencil testing? Online. Count me in. My teachers had convinced me. We had talked about it. My AP, we were all on board, online testing. And I got to thinking about it. Well, research tells me that in the first couple of years of implementation, achievement drops when you test online. So I don't know, maybe I don't want to do that. And then I got to thinking, every time you've practiced that online assessment for the state, it crashed. maybe we shouldn't do that. And so the more I thought about it, I went back to my teachers and my parent group, and I said, I think I'm going to vote this way. And once I shared with them why, they completely understood. Changing your mind is okay if new evidence presents itself. You would be wrong to continue down a path that you knew wasn't right if you had additional evidence. So thankfully, we changed our mind. The other principals convinced me not to do that, as well as some teachers. We ended up taking it pencil paper, and as you remember, that's the year the whole system crashed.
Yeah.
It was a debacle. You can imagine the frustration with students sitting there trying to log in, trying to take a test. They're already anxious, and that just exacerbated an already terrible problem.
Wow, that was a great move. We didn't make that move, unfortunately. In your administration, what avenues are open for you to listen to the concerns of employees, students, parents, and the community? And how do you plan to have time available for all involved?
Yeah. So I can tell you what I do currently and what I would do if I were your director of schools. My secretary keeps my Outlook calendar. So she doesn't need permission to put an appointment on my calendar. So it wastes time. If they call her for an appointment, then they got to talk to me, and then by the time we get it scheduled, I've booked it. So she has my calendar. If it's open, I put everything in my Outlook. If it's open, I'm available. Now, being ready to speak to parents or anybody is critically important. I have children. They're very important to me. And when they have a problem, that problem is very important to me. Those parents and employees, they're no different. When they need you, they need you. It might seem like a small problem to you, but I promise you it's not to them. They need you right now. So, avenues of communication, other avenues of communication. I would immediately start a superintendent's advisory council. Not just any superintendent advisory council of select people, but it would be, I would recruit a diverse group that's representative of our student population and our city of Murfreesboro. It's very important. If you want people to buy into what you're doing, give them a voice. If you want people to own what you're doing, give them a voice. Give them a seat at the table.
Thank you.
Ms. Moore?
Good evening, Dr. Treadway. Thank you for being here. These questions are about generating support for our schools. So first, what have you done to create excitement and generate support for public schools?
First off, let me say there's never been another time where there's been more competition for students. Enrollment all across the state is dipping in school districts. Why are they dipping? Well, obviously, for obvious reason, there's a pandemic. You're seeing some kindergarten parents say, I'm going to keep my kid home for a year, so that certainly has an impact on it. You're also seeing, though, for-profit virtual schools, well, I guess they're technically not for-profit, but they're accepting funds, so when the kid leaves and goes there and enrolls, they say it's free. It's really not free. Now the state is just giving that entity our portion of ADM BEP money. So it's not free. You just lost that money. So you better be able to get people excited about coming to your school and coming to your school district. How do you do that? First off, it would be my job to be out front, cheering us on. We can do this. Let's go. Let's go. I believe strongly in controlling the narrative. Somebody's going to tell your story. You better let it be you. And you might not like the story that gets told if you're not the one telling it. So I absolutely, fervently believe that you need to tell your own story. How do you do that? Well, a lot of avenues you can use. You can use social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Every school has a web page. I would use the district web page to push out content, push out information. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. And you also need to celebrate your success. Tell them about all the good stuff you're doing. Tell them. If you don't tell them all the good things that are going on in your school or your school district, no one will know, but they will know the bad things. Tell them all the good stuff. Our schools are full of good stuff. Tell your story.
Thank you. Following up on that, can you give us an example of how you've worked with a group outside the school system to generate support for schools? So that might be with businesses, local government, community groups, the media.
Yeah, so I'll give you 3 quick examples. The first example, our students, much like, it's a diverse population. Some of them have clothing needs. They have personal hygiene needs. Maybe they need paper, pencil, school supplies. We had a group of parents that saw this need. They're like, how can we help? And so they formed an organization called NOOK, N-O-O-K. It stands for Needs of Our Kids. In a moment's notice, they have somebody on call all the time. They get donations from businesses. They keep everything. They've got a little warehouse somewhere, a little storage unit. They pay for it. They keep it there. They may have a closet now at one of the public places. I can't quite recall. I think they've moved it. But that's irrelevant. The point is, if a kid has a need, the kid tells the guidance counselor. Immediately, the guidance counselor phones whoever's on call for the NOOK, doesn't tell the kid's name, no information whatsoever. Typically, within an hour or 2 hours, whatever that child needs is there. No questions asked. Nobody cares. You need a coat, you got a coat. You need shoes, you got shoes. You need a toothbrush, you got a toothbrush. You got a shampoo, here's some shampoo. So there's one example as to how we've partnered with NOOK. So they do just fantastic work in the Franklin Special School District. The other thing that we do, we also partner with United Way. Every summer, United Way, they get people from, primarily, there are other companies that participate, but Tractor Supply is housed in Franklin, the corporate headquarters, and they pay everybody to come work for us one day. So all throughout the district, the buildings are full with United. So United Way organizes it all. Last year, it wouldn't have been last year because of COVID. It was been the year before. They painted a tremendous amount for us. Year before that, they did landscaping. So just constant reaching out and just showing appreciation for those folks. They're glad to help. We also had a ton of landscaping outside. It was overgrown. It was just everywhere. And we thought, well, we could rent something and tear that out. And then someone said, why don't you call Atmos Energy? They have all the tools to get that stuff out of there. We call Atmos Energy, we schedule it, they come in a day, it's gone, we're done. So definitely, people in the community want to help, but if you don't tell them what you need, they don't know. So you've got to communicate and let them know what your needs are.
Thank you.
Ms. Goff?
Okay, my question will be focused on school board relations and policy. It is very important that the board and the director make an effort to understand and respect each other's roles so that we can avoid unnecessary conflicts that will certainly happen from time to time. Can you share your style of working through conflict?
One thing to keep in mind, conflict is it's okay. It's actually healthy in an organization. But what you've got to keep in mind as you work through conflict is to restore the relationship that you have with the other person. I've always said, let's debate the idea, let's attack the idea, not the person, right? So if you attack the idea or the belief and not attack the person, then you restore the relationship. You don't. It's okay. Now, if you have a debate with someone and you start attacking the person, that changes everything. Now it harms the relationship. If you work with a bunch of yes people, you're probably not in a very strong organization. Someone should be pushing back. Surely someone can think of one reason why we shouldn't do something. Because if we don't poke holes in it and debate it thoroughly before we approve it and move forward with it, and it flops, that hurts children. So it should be heavily debated prior to. So I would say to that, conflict is normal, conflict is natural, it's going to happen. Let's stay focused on what we're debating and not attack one another. And then just always keep an eye on preserving the relationship after the fact, because we're still going to work together.
Okay, thank you. Developing and adopting policy is the board's major responsibility. Have you had any experience writing policy?
So as I told you, I work for what I would contend to be maybe the strongest superintendent in the state of Tennessee. He's fabulous, and he builds very strong leaders. As one of the things he does with us, as you know, most policies come from TSBA. So it comes down, and then you get a first reading and a second reading, and then you decide if you want to pass it. Maybe you pass it on first reading. That's completely up at the board's discretion. But what he's very good at, and has given me an opportunity to review that before it goes to the board, in principal meetings, he shares with us, here are the revisions. TSBA will send revisions down. Hey, here, this is being revised. He'll let us look at it, look at the wording change. Now, how does the wording change in this edit compared to before it was edited? Do we need to change any of our practices or policies? Most of the time it's no. Most of the time the edits are minimal, but there are times when it is necessary. So before it goes to first reading, he's really good about, in principals meetings, sharing that information with us, letting us look through it. Now, did we set the policy? No, the policy just came from TSBA as a suggested revision. Now, there are times where I've served on committees and we've set policies. I can give you examples of that. Whenever we introduced one-to-one devices in our school district, I was on the committee that visited several school districts to figure out, how are we going to do that? What policies and practices are we going to implement in order to ensure that technology is maximized? Are we going to take them home? Are we going to leave them at school? All of the things that you could possibly imagine. So we investigated that. We investigated to make sure, too, that are we following all the proper laws? Because the kid can't have a Google email unless they're a certain age. So all of those things. And it took, as you can imagine, several months before we were ready to, we actually had the devices before we were ready to roll them out. So, you know, a lot of work goes in there, planning way before you're ready to do something. So just, you know, that is my experience with creating policy. Again, as you all know, a lot of that policy comes down from TSBA, and then you're just asked to review it, and if you want to pass it or not. And that is up to you as a board, as you know.
And the last question is, we depend on our director to provide us with sufficient information so that we can make informed decisions and control the results of those decisions. What is your plan to communicate with the board?
So if you hire me as your director of schools, if you don't know something, it'll be because I didn't know it. And then we'll figure out what the lapse there was. I never want you to get blindsided in the community. That's not fair to you. For somebody to come up to you and tell you something that you had no idea about, that doesn't feel very good. So each week on Fridays from me, you would receive the previous week in review, anything that happened that I think you might want to know about. Anything significant happened, school lockdowns, things like that, you would know about immediately. But, you know, just common everyday stuff. You'd get an email on Friday of the week in review and the upcoming week. Perhaps you've been invited to, perhaps you want to go to a play at a school or an assembly. I'll try to get those on there so that you know, you can put them on your calendar. I know you like to go to functions when you're able to. It makes it really difficult, though, if you get invited 30 minutes before it starts. So, you know, it's good for you to attend those things, but you can't attend them if you don't know about it. You know, text messages, I would, if hired as the director, I would love to get to know each and every one of you, get to know your likes, dislikes, get to know what really motivates you and drives you. What is your purpose? What's your why? Why did you choose to be on the school board? You didn't have to be here 5 straight nights. There has to be a reason why you want to be here, and it's probably because of kids. So I would love to know more about that.
Thank you.
Ms. Moore?
Thank you. These questions are about diversity and equity. What evidence can you cite to demonstrate you have the ability to work effectively with diverse student populations and multicultural groups?
So both schools that I've led as a principal have been extremely diverse. And I've already noted that I do see diversity as a strength. It's an absolute strength in a community. A couple of things that I've done at the school that I'm at now to work with diverse groups. We have a large number of Hispanic students. Some of their parents do not speak English. Just something simple. I don't send a single thing out unless it's translated. It feels cold and disrespectful if I don't speak English and you say you want me to be part of your school and you send me a document in English and I don't have any idea what it says, but you want me to take ownership and feel like I belong in your school. Well, you've already excluded me because I don't know what it says. So that's just one simple thing that we do. I've also explained to you how we did the talent development, how we really broke that down and looked at it to see why does it not, we have a diverse school. Why isn't this class diverse? So we did the same thing with our honors programming. In the Franklin Special School District, we have 5-8 honors programming. It's very rigorous coursework for kids that want to be there. And so we've opened that door up so that more kids can get in. Because what we saw was, again, where's the diversity? We know those kids are capable. They're very capable. And we did little things like when our teachers saw talent in a kid, they picked the phone up and said, hey, your kid should be in honors class. Now, when you call them, they're like, my kid? Yes, your kid is very talented. Now, all of a sudden, the parents said, okay, let's go for it. But if we don't reach out, recognize those talented kids, if we don't do it, it's not going to get done. So another thing that we do with work with our Hispanic families, and they're so thankful. It's such a good time. It's probably my favorite time of the year, is they come in and cook for us. So it's lunch. It is a feast. I mean, it is just amazing. Anything and everything that you want. And they're so thankful to be able to serve in that capacity. Just thankful. And it's just, it's amazing. We also employ a parent liaison who serves as my translator, who attends IEP meetings, who attends, she does all my translations. Like today, I prepared my weekly news and notes to go out Sunday afternoon at 1. She translated that and then she recorded it. So it's going out so that parents can glean information from that. You know, I would just say anytime you're working with diverse groups, you have to make them feel welcome and like they belong. And you do that by treating all people with respect and giving everybody equal access. That's how you do it.
Thank you. So that's looking within one school. Now looking across the system.
Mm-hmm.
How can a school system work toward education equity across racial and economic differences in that system?
So the first thing you have to do is develop an understanding of what does it mean? What does equality mean? What does that mean? What is diversity? So last Saturday I attended via Zoom our entire board and our entire leadership team. So that would be principals, assistant principals, and all central office personnel. We attended a Zoom session. It was supposed to be in person, but it became Zoom for obvious reasons, COVID. It was by Derek Young, amazing speaker. And we spent 4 hours talking about diversity and why do people not feel welcomed? It was amazing. And so what I would say is, how do you move a district toward that? The first thing you have to do is help everybody understand, like, what is diversity? Like, what is equity? What are all those things? You know, he talked about a lot of things dealing with microaggressions that you might not even think of, little things that prevent people from gaining access. So, you know, first thing I would do is encourage us to do that. And then from there, I would ask the principals to take it back to their faculties, do a similar training, and throughout the year we would continue to have professional development centered around diversity training as well as equity. The other thing I would say, that's all well and good to train the adults, but you got to teach the children what it means as well. We're currently using a program in Franklin Special. We just started using it. It's based on the teachings of Martin Luther King Jr. And so it's about civil rights. And so we're just using it to teach about all civil rights. What does that mean? And that's how we're going to make a change. We're not going to, and you can't do it one time. It has to be every time. This is just not something that we did that one time. This is who we are. We're going to keep doing this. So, I would think, in your strategic plan, you might want to include that as a goal. And that would be up to the board to do that. But, that's a possibility because it is something significant that needs to be done.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Settles, who is ill and not with us tonight, has criterion 6, and I'm going to try to remember the questions. I do remember one question that he did ask, and that is, what was the topic of, and what group did you speak to in your last speech?
Okay. So I speak. If you don't write and speak well, you probably can't work for my current director. We present each semester to him and to his leadership team, which is all of central office. So they'll script questions, they'll send to us, and then we are speaking and presenting about those topics. Now, that's the easy part. The hard part is when they start asking follow-up questions, and then you've got to come up with it immediately. I also do presentations each semester with him on our data, so he'll bring the associate director for teaching and learning out. You sit down with your director, you explain what's going on in your school. I'll speak maybe, I think next month I'll have to complete a speech at the tenure reception. So that's exciting. Each year we have to speak at the retirement reception. Of course, those things didn't happen last year, but those are just normal things. Now, given the option, what is my favorite thing to teach about or speak about is leadership, specifically knowing your impact. I think it's so vitally important that as educators we realize the impact that we have on young people's lives. Now, it can be really good, or we could also have a negative impact, which we don't want. So that's why it is so important to know your impact.
Okay. What evidence can you give us to demonstrate that you are an effective writer?
Well, I could let you read my dissertation.
What was the topic of your
The
dissertation?
topic of my dissertation was the effects on technology on student achievement.
And what did you determine?
Well, the research pointed me in the direction that professional development was necessary. And I mean, it's kind of what I said earlier. If you just hand the students and the teachers a device, that does little. And in some cases, it actually lowers achievement. But it has to be coupled with professional development, and not just one time, initial and ongoing.
Okay. Have you been successful in getting strong parental and community support for a school, program, or the district? And tell us about one of those successes.
Yeah, we have tremendous support at our school. We have a very strong PTO. Probably one of my favorite things that we do is in February of each year, the seniors, we don't have a high school in our district, much like Murfreesboro City Schools, but the seniors come back and play the faculty. That's a blast. Now, we do it after school, and we make doggone sure that a faculty member runs a scoreboard. We've never lost. We've never lost. And we're not going to. They almost beat us last year. But just to see those kids come back and see the excitement that they have, it's amazing to see them interact with their teachers. It's amazing. And then we have them back in May, and we let them walk the halls one last time. They wear their, our kids either go to Franklin High School or Centennial High School, so they wear their stuff, and they walk the halls, and we line the halls with all our kids, and we cheer for them. well, that kind of gives you goosebumps. And even though we don't have a high school, those are still our kids. That still feels really, really good. So those are just a few of the things that we've partnered with parents to be able to do.
Keep the score for Middle Tennessee basketball, and I'm sure would like to know how you guarantee that the home team doesn't lose.
Well,
Hard to do. All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Ballard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Treadway. We have, in this criterion, I'll ask you some questions regarding the problem solving, basically. So the first one is think of a problem that is brought to you recently, and what was that problem, and how did you handle it? Maybe it was something that just, spur of the moment problem that jumped up and had to be taken care of right away, or maybe it was something that took some time to solve. You pick.
Yeah. So, I mean, much like other professions, problems come at you all day long. You're constantly problem solving. But one thing that really jumps to mind is a student that we had. It's a great student. She's a hardworking student, but we could not figure out how to help her reading, and it was really troubling. And we continued to work and work and work, and she was working so hard. And finally, in one of our academic behavior support team meetings, I just said, we're not leaving until we figure this out. We got to figure this out. We got to figure it out. And so we continue to problem solve and think about the specific intervention that the child could receive. Who's going to give the intervention? Well, everybody's busy. No, somebody's doing it. We're not leaving until we figure it out. So we were able to problem solve. It did take several hours, but we were able to problem solve to free somebody up, to provide the intervention that kid needed, and then somebody to cover the other person's students. Now, that might seem like a small problem, but I'll tell you this, when I'm dealing with a student, it's the most important thing to me that there is. And it deserves my immediate and full attention.
Very good. Tell us about the most important decision you've made recently and how you involve the people that would be affected by the decision.
Well, the most important decision I've made recently is to sit before you tonight. And honestly, it was an easy decision to be part of this school district, to have the opportunity to come alongside of this board and lead this school district was not a difficult decision. And what was hard was talking to my faculty and saying, I've applied for this. I just told them it's the first date. It doesn't mean anything. It's just an interview. But that was hard to do, but they understood. And talking to my wife and my family about it, and we were all in agreement. Again, it was an easy decision to make. So that's the last decision. Hard, wouldn't call it hard, but that's the last decision I made.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Good evening, Dr. Treadway.
Good evening.
My questions are about experiences with the community and long-term goals. And I'd like to ask you, what's your vision for handling the long-term effects of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, in your current position or under your administration here?
Yeah.
And how would you build support in the community?
Yeah. So let's address the learning loss first. Students did not go to school a significant part of the second semester. They're not going every day right now. Sometimes some are doing virtual, some are doing hybrid, some are doing in person. It's difficult on families right now. It's really, really difficult on families. So you're left with, what are we going to do? We've got to catch these kids up. In the last federal CARES, or the current money coming to schools, I believe some of that may be appropriated to catch up learning. Now, what is that going to look like? Is that going to look like before school programs, after school programs? And then it goes back to the other part of the question about the community. How will you support the community? Well, so we're trying to do all these things, but we're still trying to support our families. So some kids might not be able to stay after school. What are you going to do in that scenario? Some kids might not be able to get to school early. What are you going to do in that scenario? What about summer? We could possibly do some summer activities. So, you know, there are a lot of things that are out there. But again, like I spoke previous about goal setting, let's set a goal, determine what do we want to do. Kids have got to learn. We've got to make this learning loss up. Now, what action steps are we going to take to ensure these students can catch up? So you're going to have to make sure that you're using those high-quality curricular resources. You're going to have to make sure your teachers are trained to use them. You're going to have to make sure that you're benchmarking. You're going to have to make sure that your standards are aligned, your instruction are aligned to the standards. And you're going to have to continually monitor their progress to see if what we're doing is working.
You already answered my second question, so I'll jump to the third question.
Okay?
In any other implementation of a goal or a vision previously, how have you been able to garner support specifically from your board as well as staff in implementing that vision or goal?
Yeah. So you garner support for an idea or a vision by making people part of it. So if it's not my vision, it's our vision. So we create that vision together. So it has parts of my vision, it has parts of your vision, and we're able to bring that all together, and we're creating a singular vision. You automatically take ownership because you helped with it. It's not something that somebody else wrote and said, here, there you go. It's not that at all. So when we create a vision, we want feedback from our stakeholders. We want feedback from parents. We want feedback from teachers. We want feedback from our administrators. We want all feedback. So when that gets posted in the classroom, I don't want anybody to say, I didn't write that. Yeah, you helped. Remember? This is what we said we're about. If we could be anything we wanted to be, this is what we're going to be. This is our vision. This is what we said we were going to be. Now, it's much easier to hold each other to that standard when you helped write it. Now I can use that vision to hold up as the standard. The vision in our district is excellence in teaching and learning for all. Not some, not on Mondays, all every day.
Thank you very much.
With schools in our system, that we run the range from high free and reduced level to a low free and reduced level. How do you plan to institute programs that will be within a reasonable expectation as well as serve the needs of both groups?
Yeah, so this goes back to what I was speaking of earlier. Anytime you're creating or implementing programs, it needs to be adaptable, flexible, and it needs to serve all children. It can't just serve the highest achievers. It can't just serve the lowest achievers. It's got to be adaptable and flexible and serve all children. I'll give you an example. Let's say you were going to have an intervention period. This is the time that at 1:30 every day the whole school gets extra reading. That's a program. We're going to use Spire reading. We're going to work on Spire, and everybody's going to do Spire. That's not flexibility, because now you've said even the kids who have mastered grade level content have to do Spire. That's no good. So, but what you can do is be flexible. Maybe we're going to give those kids that are on grade level or above grade level, maybe they need enrichment. So it's the same program, but we're being flexible and we're adapting to our students' needs, which is what we should always do. We should always look at what our kids need, figure out how to give it to them.
I think you probably will agree with the statement that we need one-to-one ratio of student computers, and that need has increased. What would be your goals for regarding technology?
Yeah, so in this day and age, and you really need to be one-to-one. As we explored that in the Franklin Special School District, we visited Lebanon Special School District, and we looked at day use versus overnight use. And we were worried about overnight use. We were worried about breakage. if we send it home, is it going to cost a lot? In other words, are more screens going to get broken? Are keys going to get popped off? What's that going to look like? So for the first, until COVID, until the pandemic, we were day use only. So the kid picked it up in the morning in their home base, charged it on a cart. Then they took it back in that afternoon, plugged it up to fully charge. Now, it's a lot to get ready for. It absolutely is. I mean, you've got to make sure you've got your user agreements ready. You've got to make sure that, you've got your parent agreement signs. You're going to have some parents that aren't going to want those in. Now, going back to the original question, what would be my goal? My goal would be for us to be one-to-one. Now, computers cost money. So it might take us a little while to get there, but also part of the strategic plan, I think you would want to include what is our goal to get there? When do we want to get there? When do we want to be one-to-one? Let's just go ahead and earmark funds. We're going to use them for this. And we can get to one-to-one. Now, once everybody has a computer, you're still going to have to figure out how to deal with breakage. So we would still have to work together to figure that out. Our technology department does a really, really good job with it. We don't really have as much breakage as we thought we would. Initially, we did, and now the news worn off, and it's just like a textbook. It's just something that they have. So, I would say address it in your strategic plan, budget for it, and just make it happen. Make it a reality. If it's important, we'll figure out how to do it. But absolutely, I would move to one-to-one.
Describe your experience in developing or implementing and evaluating an instructional program that has improved educational outcomes for students.
That was a lot, Chairman.
Sir?
That was a lot. I've got it written down, though. I'm ready.
Okay.
All right. So I can give you a few examples. So the question was implementing, evaluating. How do we do those things? So we have a reading need in our district. You have a reading need in your district. We have a reading need all across the state. Let's be honest. Reading scores, proficiency scores have lagged, not just in Murfreesboro City Schools. It's not a Murfreesboro City School issue. It's a state of Tennessee issue. So what we did was, through our screening processes, we began identifying and grouping kids based on need. Do you have a decoding need? Do you have a basic reading need? Do you have a phonics need? Do you have comprehension needs? What are your specific needs? And then we begin matching kids in groups with a scientific-based, evidence-based intervention that was proven to work if you use it the way it's supposed to be used. I can give you one thing that we're using. It's called Just Words, and it's a basic reading program. And you think, you're in middle school, why do you need basic reading? A large number of kids are leaving the third grade not reading on grade level. If you leave the third grade and you're not reading on grade level, the chances of catching up are not good. You're probably going to spend a significant amount of time trying to catch up. So it's vitally important that our K2, K3 teachers really have a strong background in teaching reading, strong pedagogy in that area, and really know how to teach it and assess it and remediate it and provide additional support whenever needed. So we've identified needs. We have implemented a program. The program is called Just Words. I'm not here to plug Just Words. I'm just telling you that that's what we use. We continue to progress monitor. So we teach the lesson. Every week or 2 weeks, we progress monitor the kid. Then we look at the rate of improvement. Is the kid learning? Now, if the program is not effective, not all programs work for all kids. I told you in educational research, just because it worked for this group of participants doesn't mean it's going to work for all groups of participants. That's just where you've got to start problem solving. But we want to stick with the same intervention. For us, we like to use a semester. Now, if in a semester's time, research says that this kid should have gained, his rate of improvement should be something that it's not, and the kid's lower than the expected rate of improvement, and we've got to start looking at some things. Maybe we're going to change who's delivering the intervention. Maybe we're going to change the time of the intervention. Maybe the kid's hungry in the morning. Maybe we need to move it to the afternoon. Maybe the group's too big. Maybe he needs to learn in a smaller group. So you're looking at all of these things as you are evaluating and implementing programs. It's just, it's constant. It's not, and again, it's constant training too. As new things come up, you've got to make sure your staff knows how to do it. Too many times, somebody buys a program, puts it in a school building, but they forgot to teach them how to use it. If you don't teach them how to use it, it's useless. So you got to have ongoing, initial and ongoing. And you also can't forget, you have teacher turnover every year. So guess who hasn't been exposed to that? The new teachers. So part of your new teacher induction, part of your new teacher onboarding or induction plan has to, you got to be sure that they're learning the skills they need to be effective the first day they get into the classroom. So, you know, we have a very extensive new teacher induction program. It's actually 5 years. It's very rigorous. It takes them up to tenure. And, you know, we address a lot of those things. You know, if we're starting a new program, you weren't here last year, you missed the initial training, let's catch you up. But those are things that you constantly have to be mindful of.
Thank you. Mr. Ballard?
Thank you, sir. Okay, earlier today in the Zoom meeting, you mentioned the whole child. So can you give us an example of how you've used the whole child approach? And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
You don't educate a child in a silo. You don't just get to educate the academics without dealing with the social and emotional needs of that child. If you don't address the whole child, all the child's needs, the academics is not going to happen. You know, one of the things that we work extensively in is with Vanderbilt University with the Tennessee Behavior Support Project. It's a great organization. We really work hard with kids that need extra tiered behavior support. How do we help them? It's all about how do we give them the tools to be successful. So we're constantly driven towards the whole child. You know, celebrating small successes, just academics, social, emotional, it all matters. And as I noted on the Zoom call, and I'll reference it again now, is we have a licensed therapist, a counselor that is actually in our school 5 days a week. It's through a nonprofit organization. We just give them the space, and they work on a sliding scale. The kid does not, of course, it does require parental permission. We're not allowed for anybody to see, for them to see anybody. All the same rules apply. All we're doing is giving them space, office space, a private space, a confidential area, and then they see the children. The child never leaves school, doesn't miss a class, because what do we know? They're probably already behind anyway. So now they need to go get behavioral health therapy, but they don't want to miss school. Maybe they don't have a ride. Well, we've solved a lot of those problems. So that's how, you know, again, if you don't address the whole child, you're missing the boat.
very good. Thank you. We'll go back to technology just a moment. What educational technology have you actually implemented in your administration over the schools?
Yeah, so we use Chromebooks. Chromebooks, if you don't know what a Chromebook is, it's a computer without a hard drive. Everything is through the cloud, so to speak. So as long as you have internet, everything you save, you're saving to the cloud. We are a Google district, so we use slides, sheets. Oh goodness, I went blank there. But all the Google products we use Google Classroom. The kids know how to use all of those. Each kid's computer has you guys use Clever also. Clever is on there. They can log in to use all of their apps. So that's what I have. My background from implementation is from Chromebooks, but any device is similar, whether you're doing, laptop computers, whether you're doing iPads, it's similar. But I'll tell you one thing that we learned and experienced quickly, it's not just the kids that need to know how to use those things. We get a lot of phone calls from parents that say, I don't know how to do this. And it's a lot. I mean, they're trying to go to multiple platforms. They're trying to log in. They don't know their password. They're not sure where they're supposed to go. It can be quite overwhelming. So, you know, in the pandemic era, it's just not the teachers and the students that need to be trained. It's also the parents. We've got to make sure that we give them enough assistance so that they can provide that same assistance to their child.
Good, thank you. And finally, I've got a question regarding the reopening of schools. It's a
How much
goal-
time do we have?
That's why we saved it till last. So, what are your thoughts, and how have you thought you would, if you were the kazooker of all of that, how would you start schools?
Yeah, so first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get feedback from the community to find out what's important in our community. We can all agree on two things. One, kids need to be back in school safely. And teachers want to be back in school safely. Now, how do we make that happen? So, you know, this is a multifaceted issue. We've been very fortunate in Franklin Special. We staggered the first 2 weeks, and we've been in person ever since. Quarantining faculty members will close a school. We have not seen large outbreaks. Now, if you haven't reviewed it, I would encourage you to review. It's not a study. It's more of a suggested guidelines for reopening school by Brown University. And it talks about using community metrics versus school level metrics. So if you look in Williamson County right now, the community spread metric is really, really high. It's not high in our school. So, you know, although our back to school plan talks about using community spread, we do talk about it, and we answer phone calls about it, but down here in the school, we're not seeing that. Now, what mitigation factor? How in the world do you ever get back to school? I can tell you what we did. We started at the most basic thing. We started with school buses. How are we going to keep them safe on a school bus? They're right on top of each other. This is never going to work. So one of the first things we did, we said, parents, if you can bring your kid to school, bring them to school. That'll really help us. It'll help us socially distance on the school bus. And they've done that. Because why? They want their kids back in school, but they want them back in school safely. So that was one of the things we did. We also had to set up screening stations because we can't let them in school if they have a fever, right? But we wanted to screen them at the bus stop, but what if the parent's not there and you got to let them on the bus? The parent's gone. The parent's gone to work. So we have screening stations set up so when they get off the bus, they walk in, we take their temperature. And I'm happy to say not a single kid has registered a temperature either in our bus lane or our car rider lane. So, you know, that has not been an issue as far as being able to catch kids with a fever. Now, some kids may be asymptomatic and they test, and then that's another issue. All right, what are you going to do when they get off the school bus? What are you going to do with them now? They got to go somewhere. So every kid has an assigned seat in morning. Some go to the gym, some go to the cafeteria, some go to overflow classrooms. That number where you sit is your number. It's your number all year. So if someone were to become ill and I had to do contact tracing, I can pull out the seating chart and I know where you were. And our kids know that. We've taught them how to do it. They just do it. Now, hallway transitions. What do you do when the bell rings? Like, how do we transition in the hallways? Well, we've staggered our schedule. It's not traditional. Not everybody gets to go to their lockers every time the bell rings either, because that just floods the locker area and puts kids in close proximity. The CDC is now saying it's not 15 minutes at one time, it's 15 minutes cumulative. That adds up quick. That's probably, if you're my locker mate and we go to the locker, you know, we get 5 minutes between classes, and in one day we've probably met that, even if we don't have a class together. So you've got to make sure your kids are where they're supposed to be. Now, other factors that you've got to consider are lunch. Everybody's got to have a seat, all right? How are you going to feed them? You can't start at 9 o'clock feeding them, so you may end up with certain groups on certain days having to eat in the classroom. But teachers will get a duty-free lunch. That's important. You can't ask them to, today I want you to watch. No, they're already doing enough. We can figure out how to do it. Teachers don't miss their planning time. They still get their duty-free lunch. you can absolutely figure out how to do it. Is it a lot of planning? Yes, it took us months of planning to get it right. Do we still have to make adjustments sometimes? Yes. Dismissal's the same way. We stagger dismissal. Again, request as many people as they can, pick your kid up, take your kid home. You live close to school, please consider walking to school. Ride your bike to school. So the Brown University study also references cracking the window can cause the air to circulate, I believe, 20 to 30 times in, I'm not going to say the rate, but you can reference that. That's not really an option when it's cold outside, but it is when it's, if it's a short bus ride, it might be an option. But it's multifaceted. But before you can reopen school, the number one thing you have to do is build trust in your community. You got to let them know that we're going to keep your kids safe. You got to let our teachers and staff know we're going to keep you safe. We're going to listen to you. We're going to take care of you. Those are the two primary things. Now, you got to get feedback on your initial plan. Draft your initial plan. Let the public see it. Let them ask you questions about it. It will put their mind at ease when they ask you questions and you are able to give them an answer because we've already thought of it. This is what we're going to do. And if we haven't thought about it, great. You just helped us. We hadn't thought of that. Thank you for doing that. You got to let the teachers look at it. We're going to have teachers that are going to be anxious, going to be nervous about going back to school. In situations where it's pertinent, let's give them a group of kids and they can be the virtual teacher. We've done that in our district. So the other thing, if you have 5 kids at one school that want to be virtual, there's no need to assign a teacher to those 5 kids in that school. Let's take 5 from Bradley. Let's take 5 from Scales. Let's take 5 from another school. Now we've got 15 third graders that all want to do virtual. Now we just need a teacher to do that. So, you've got to be really creative when teachers are quarantined, which they will be. We're very flexible. We let them work from home. So they're zooming in with the class. Now, do I have to have somebody in there to watch the class? Yes. But I could speak for hours about this. Hopefully I'll get the opportunity to work this problem with you. But I'll stop there because I could talk for days about how do you successfully reopen school because we've done it.
Okay, thank you very much. Just remind us again, what's the size of Franklin School Special
So
District?
we have 8 schools. So we have 3, we got 1 7-8 school, 1 5-8 school, which is my school, 1 5-6 school, and the rest of the schools are elementary schools, K-5. So we have, the size of the student body is anywhere, you've got schools at 370, 380, but they're smaller in square foot. So you still have social distancing concerns, and you've got to figure out how to do that. We have other ones that are, elementary schools that are much larger. So, it's all of, and that's a great question. Those are all factors that you've got to take into consideration. All factors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, board members, I will ask you if any of you have a question you'd like to ask Dr. Treadway. Mr. Richardson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. Remind me, you grew up in East Tennessee, right?
Yes, sir.
But you still root for the Blue Raiders, right?
You better believe I do.
Very good.
Well, that was an important question.
Oh,
Thank
that
you.
was just the prelude, Mr. Chairman. Murfreesboro City Schools has exactly one employee, and that's the director, right? And they're charged with executing faithfully the will of the board as well as all of the policies that we adopt.
Yep.
And we do that with the assistance of central office.
Mm-hmm.
How have you worked with your central office, A, and how would you bring excellence in communication to our central office under your administration?
All right, so I can tell you exactly what I've already done. I've already thought about it. I'll tell you the way we do it, and I would mimic a lot of the things that we already do. The first Tuesday after every board meeting, principals are required to go to board meetings in our district, which we could talk about that. I think it's helpful. I know what's going on. If my director of school has a question about my school, if a board member, I'm there to answer it. If there's a parent there with a concern, I'm there to answer it. But that wasn't the question, so we'll table that for another day. But after every board meeting, we have board meetings on Monday, so on Tuesday, we know we're meeting. So it is the central office team, all the central office, the director of schools, principals and assistant principals. And the first time we did that, I thought, you can't do that. You can't leave a school with nobody in it. The kids, they're going to run wild. Didn't happen. Like, I've never been called out of a meeting. Never. You know, we do leave a principal designee in charge. And so what that does is that puts us all together. And when the director's speaking to us, he's talking to all of us. Like, I'm hearing one voice. I'm hearing it one time. I'm not hearing it secondhand. I'm not hearing it through email. He said it. I nodded my head yes that I heard him. We're all in agreement, and we all understand this is what we're doing. Now, there's power and accountability in that too. When we're sitting together, we just made a commitment. Yes, we're doing this. Well, you didn't do it. So now we have each other holding one another accountable. You said you were going to do that, and you didn't do it. And so, the communication and the camaraderie is through the roof. I mean, we enjoy meeting. We really do. Like, we look forward to it. Sometimes the meetings are long, and sometimes they're not about topics that we want to talk about. But, it's nice to be able to catch your breath for a minute, meet with everybody, and visit. So I would absolutely look at starting that, and that would be my leadership team, would be all central office employees, as well as assistant principals and the principals. And in that fashion, when we're communicating face-to-face, I love Zoom, but there's something special about me being able to look at you in the eye and communicate with you. I can, a lot of communication is through body language. If you can't see my body, or you can't see my hands, you can't see my facial expressions, sometimes that's lost in translation. So that would be one of the things that I would do to increase communication. And then I would meet monthly with just my principals too, in my central office instructional person, just to make sure that we're all on board. We know what we're doing. I would also implement fall semester and spring semester data meeting, as well as central office staff meetings. So I would bring my staff there, and we would have a meeting. And my hope would be that we would have at least monthly staff meetings, probably every other month, especially in the early going, I'm sorry, I didn't mean every other month, every other week, while we get to know each other and we really form our guiding coalition.
Thank you very much, Dr. Treadway. Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Moore?
Thank you. Change can be scary for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
And as you know, you are an external candidate in a pool where we have some internal candidates. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about how you would approach the beginning of your term and that balance between the ideas that you're bringing and getting to know this district as someone coming from outside.
So first and foremost, the first day on the job, if you selected me as your director of schools, is relationship building. I want to get out there in the schools. I want to meet the teachers. I want to meet the administrators. I want to get to know them. I want them to get to know me. And I want us to build a very strong relationship. Secondly, I just need to be quiet and listen for a little while. Just listen for a couple of months and observe. How can a new person come in and just start making all these wholesale changes if they haven't watched and they don't have, you don't know that it's broken unless you start watching. So I understand that the trepidation that some may feel, but I do feel like once they got to know me, I feel like I would put them at ease and just let them know that we're in this together. We're working hard. Change is difficult. If you understand andragogy at all, which is how adults learn, one of the things is the need to know. Well, if you start changing stuff, first thing they're going to ask you is why. Like, why are we changing? They need to know, why are we doing this? Why am I having to learn this? And so before you can suggest a change, it's paramount, it's imperative that you have a full picture of what's going on before you just start making wholesale changes. So The first thing I'm doing, building relationships. Second thing, observing. Third thing, listening.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there anything that you want to or need to tell us that we have not already discussed in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I know you're tired. You've been away from your families for 5 nights. But I'm going to leave you with this. It's been said that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. My hope is that we can go together and we can continue the great things that are being done in Murfreesboro City Schools. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. And it's been an honor to interview before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Treadway.
Our board, Chris, will meet next Tuesday. And at that point in time, we plan to come up with a selection to all be able to offer a contract for someone to be our new director. The date to offer that contract will be February the 9th, with hoping then that our new director will be on board April the 5th, which is right after the break. That's kind of our timeline as we go forward. And again, we thank you very much for being with us tonight and today, this afternoon. It's been a pleasure. And if nothing else comes before this board, we will adjourn. Thank you.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Treadway.